Hello and welcome to NATA's Legislative Real Talk, where we talk about recent events in Washington, D.C. and their effect on aviation businesses. I'm your guest host, Michael France, the Managing Director of Safety and Training at NATA, and I'm excited to be joined today by NATA's Manager of Fuel Quality and Safety, Steve Barry. Steve, thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here.
What we're going to be talking about today is the aviation fuel supply disruptions that many FBOs are seeing and facing right now. So, Steve, tell us a little bit about what's going on.
For those of you who are watching this, I'm sure this is not news to you that it's a little bit harder now to get fuel than it was in the past. Used to be you could order fuel on a Friday and get it delivered on a Saturday. It seems like those days are behind us at the current moment. As much as we hate to, or everybody's probably tired of things getting blamed on the pandemic, this is another result of what we've experienced over the last 18 months. So before the pandemic hit, there was already a shortage of transport drivers. Roughly about 10% of the nation's fleet was sitting idle because of a lack of drivers. And then the pandemic came along and it really exacerbated that issue to the nth degree and for a number of reasons. The first one being is that demand for fuel just dropped across the entire industry, not just ours, but also motor fuels with people traveling less and fewer airplanes flying and fewer cars driving. The carriers who bring this fuel to airports and to gas stations around the country, all of a sudden they found themselves with a drastic reduction in the loads that they were paid to carry. So, like anybody else, and I don't blame them at all, they moved to other industries where they could continue to make a paycheck and demand was up. So that's the first problem that we're seeing with the driver shortage. The second one is that we're hearing is there's an aging workforce. Mike, I've talked to several transport carriers that specialize in the hauling of aviation fuel, and they all say, the average age of their drivers is somewhere between 45 and 55 years old. So we've got an older workforce that's aging out of the industry, and we don't have a fresh crop of new drivers to come in. And another thing I've heard from some carriers is as these older drivers age out, or even some that may have been on the cusp of retiring, they kind of took this as their cue to bow out. This was their opportunity to maybe retire early or move on to something else. So that's another factor. On top of that, now I won't quite say post-pandemic, but we're getting there. Demand has skyrocketed, and we're left with not the same amount of drivers we had before the pandemic, where we were already short, but now far less. So the numbers that I'm hearing now, anywhere between 20 and 25% of the nation's fleet of tanker trucks are sitting idle because of a lack of qualified drivers to get behind the wheel and get fuel to airports.
The disruption many FBOs are facing really doesn't have a lot to do with the supply of actual fuel, and for the most part, it's more about getting the fuel from the terminal to the airport.
The fuel is there. It's at the terminals, the industry, the refineries and the fuel suppliers, they have enough supply. It exists. The bottleneck that we're seeing is just drivers physically driving the fuel from the terminal
Right.
to the airport.
So, Steve, that kind of begs the question, or actually two questions. Number one, what is NATA doing for our members in terms of like a short-term fix, maybe, and a more longer-term strategy to address this issue? But also, as an FBO, what can I be doing to operate more effectively in this disruption time?
Within the short term, what we're doing is working with our members and regulators to find short-term solutions that will alleviate the issue and ensure our members and the broader industry continue to get the fuel that they need to keep general aviation flying and our economy moving along. Long scale, it's a bit tougher. It's going to require a full-scale workforce development plan with everything from recruitment, retainment, and funding. To your second point, what can FBOs do to reduce the impact on their operations? If folks that are ordering fuel, if they can meet the truck at the gate, get them to the fuel farm, have all their pre-receipt inspections done, that means sticking the tank, sumping the filters, sumping the tank, all the items that occur before you ever offload a fuel truck. If you can have those ready to go when the truck gets there, meet them and get them out the gate, then that saves that hour, 2 hours that truck may be sitting idle, just simply waiting to get that fuel offloaded into the airport. You got to remember, drivers are limited in the number of hours that they can haul fuel. And if they're spending, or per day rather, per DOT regulations, And if you're spending 2 hours just simply waiting to get the fuel offloaded at an airport, then that's 2 hours that that driver loses in his day. I know it's easy for me to sit here and say, meet the truck and get it offloaded as soon as possible when you've got dozens of planes on the ramp and customers that need things. I understand that. But if our members can keep that, kind of in the forefront of their mind of that domino and ripple effect that it has when transport carriers need to wait and how that affects things further down the line, I think we could see a slight improvement or at least assist instead of hinder the problem. And another thing FBOs can do, Mike, is to place standing fuel orders with their fuel suppliers.
Okay.
What we're hearing from the fuel suppliers themselves is it's anywhere, we're out 5 to 7 days on jet fuel and
Yep.
7 to 10 days for avgas. So if you've already got a standing fuel order, that puts you in the queue, sooner than later, rather than waiting till you're about to run out. If you can have that standing fuel order in place or plan for those delays, then that'll put you in a better position. Also, communicate with your customers. It's kind of a group effort across the entire industry, not just from the FBO and the transport side, but also from the aircraft operators, making them aware of the issue that they should tanker fuel when possible, and then being mindful of those max uplifts that they may encounter in specific regions.
Wow, Steve. So, this has been great.
Thanks, Mike.
If there's any questions you have, you can feel free to email us or check out the website for more information.